Welcome to The Centurion's Path, a podcast about the life and the trials and tribulations of those who serve. This podcast is about the heroes who protect our communities. To truly understand the path of the protector, tune in with AJ DeAndrea and John McDonald, two nationally known leaders who live the Centurion's Path every day. Thank you all for joining us today, and thanks to our sponsor for today's podcast, Southwestern Communications, enriching lives and improving school safety since 1976.
Welcome to the Centurions Podcast, Episode 9. We are back in Denver again and podcasting live with a couple of great friends and brothers. Mike Touchton, Karl Ballard joining AJ and I for more of a lighthearted conversation than we typically have. We get a little deep and sometimes a little dark, and
we hope it's lighthearted, but
yeah,
I don't know.
We're a lot
Considering Karl didn't know what a podcast was.
Yeah, until 5 minutes ago.
It's probably going to be pretty. It'll be pretty enlightening, and we're just happy Karl showed up wearing pants. So I think we're gonna.
But he said we'd actually be in a pod. That's what he told me.
This is a pod.
Episode 9.
Yeah. Woo-hoo.
What the hell?
I know. It's shocking. Season 2.
Season 2. There you go. Right?
Season 2, Episode 9.
Here we go.
Look how nervous Mike is.
Oh, we haven't even started on Mike yet.
Oh, yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just worried that somebody's gonna touch a button and tears. I wanted to keep this light because this is a good group of dudes to be around and just chat.
If anybody's going to cry, it'll be Karl. So
I do get emotional.
It's okay. You're Irish. It's allowed. What do they say?
There's no whiskey in this coffee cup.
What do they say? Got him into whiskey to stop the Irish from ruling the world?
That's right. 100%.
That's right. So why don't we, for the sake of our listeners, tell us. I'll start with you, Mike. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you're doing now, when you quit using the Just for Men.
Oh man,
coloring.
I got a fresh haircut for this day, brother. I'm a local guy. I grew up in the Denver metro area. Graduated in 1988.
Yeah,
feeling old. Went up to Western State College in Gunnison. Best 5 years of my life. I was played basketball and ran track up there, and it was when I was up there when I was like, you know what, man, I think this cop thing would be cool. Looking around, what gives you a team feel? What gets you active? What gets you working with people? And I switched my major from kinesiology to law enforcement and sociology. So we all know what sociology classes are, right?
Yeah.
Best course load for somebody playing sports. Still got my C+, and it was the early 90s, came out. First agency I tested for was the Arvada Police Department. Toughest written test I'd ever been in. Looking around going, man, these guys must really want somebody good. I don't know if I'm ready.
And they still select
600 people showed up for 3 jobs. Right.
I remember those days.
Remember those days?
Yep.
And I'm looking around the room. There's some very talented people. That was in 93. When AJ got hired.
I got hired there.
And I went, I tested everywhere for about 4 years. Moved out to California for about a year with a job. Took my bride out there, had our firstborn, and we were in the San Francisco Bay area, and I was like, I can't raise a child out here. Went back to Colorado, moved in with my folks, put myself through an academy, and tried Arvada again. And I was able to get that job. And it's been 25 years later.
Wow.
Right now, I just got promoted to commander. It was anointed. Yeah.
No testing.
So we had a lieutenant position that I did test for. Thought I did pretty well in that. Well. High-flying bunch of dudes. We had 6 positions and a great group of competitors for those jobs. Been working swings, B-side of the week. Got a very hard-working group of people with me. And then we did a realignment, and Chief was looking around at his 6 lieutenants, and he says, hey, you guys are doing commander work, and I want to condense the leadership lines, and he just kind of anointed us. So Not a lot of fanfare, but not a process either. So I'll take that, right?
Absolutely.
Dang straight.
Every day.
It's a big deal.
A process can keep you up for months.
Yeah.
So, it's been a blessing. I'm very happy with the way things are going. Got a new patrol team, working with those folks, some new sergeants, and just trying to pass down all the wealth of information I've got from the people that came before me, right? And do right by them. And it's been a good ride. Now we got to start looking at how much longer can we actually do this? So,
Right.
But I blend everything that I do with a lot of work with people, whether it's training, coaching, mentoring, all those other things. So it's been a full career.
Been a
Yes, it
good
has.
career.
And we spent quite a few years on SWAT together.
Yeah. Right now I'm a SWAT commander. I got 2 talented dudes helping me with the Jefferson County Regional SWAT team, and a bunch of hard chargers, guys working hard, preparing for their given day. And, I think we're in a good place. I'm really happy with the situation that I'm in right now. It's uncommon, for Jefferson County Regional SWAT that 3 former team leaders are part of the leadership for the command group. So I know the team leaders now appreciate that insight into what they're doing downrange, and it translates well when now we're talking to incident commanders from whatever agency we're working with to handle their problems. So, the experience that I got from being on the Jefferson County Regional SWAT team for 9.5 years really prepared me well for a lot of these situations that we're seeing now.
Yeah. And that's a good evolution, right? I mean, it was, like I said, it was unheard of to even have any type of leadership involved. But as the team grows and things change and evolve, it's in a really good place.
Yeah. And we get a chance to check their math a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because we all know
Damn straight.
kind of what the TL's doing downrange.
Yeah.
Might be a couple of steps ahead of what the command thinks is going on.
Exactly.
So, being out on those training days, it's weird. You're not like part of the team doing those things. You're just kind of oversight.
Right.
But you get that team feel, and you get to interact with these guys, and their hearts and minds, and they're putting their bodies in the right place to do the right thing, and it's that calling, and they're all living it. So it's a great thing to be a part of.
Really cool.
That's very cool.
And Karl, why don't just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and
Well, 2 things I got from
How
that
you
was
ended
number
up
one, I can't even pronounce kinesiology or spell it. I don't even know what it is. Number 2, when I think of him mention the college, I want to see that kid with the nachos. That whole story. We won't say the name, but the kid that was begging for nachos and had cheese all over him. Karl Ballard, and it's an honor and a privilege to be here, as always, with my brothers and family. My path was a little different. So I grew up in New York, right outside of the Bronx, New York, in an area that was mostly kind of an old school Irish community. So the Irish do 2 things. They become cops or firemen for the most part. And so I knew a lot of, I grew up with it.
And you were born in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moved when I was 3. My mom, my 2 sisters. My mom raised the 3 of us, working for Big Bros and Big Sisters, which she still does today. And she'll never leave New York. She came to Colorado twice and will never come back. The crickets kept her up at night. And so, I grew up with it. I mean, I remember sitting in the, where I'm from, it's a little bit more relaxed. I mean, the kids grow up in the bars, and they're family bars, they're neighborhood bars. Everybody knows each other, but the kids are in the back outside playing. But it was these are the times when the officers would still be wearing their uniform and belly up to the bar and with their gun belts on and that kind of thing. And so it was just the way we were raised. And so Mike already mentioned it. Whenever we teach, I always talk about the job is a calling. I mean, we're all destined to do it. It's what's inside of us. It's not for the money or recognition. It's just what's inside of us, right? But I was fortunate enough to, unlike Commander Touchton, I was fortunate enough to actually be an athlete. And so I had an opportunity to go play football out, leave New York, come to Colorado State, where I played football. Under the best coach that's ever been, Sonny Lubick, and get a chance to win some games back then. I know it's a little different now, but we actually used to win some games. But no, they'll turn it around. They always do. And so after that, I was again, believe it or not, I still don't believe, but I had a chance to play a little bit of professional football, bouncing around, mostly in the NFL Europe is where I spent the majority of my time. And but I always knew the job was always there. I mean, Sonny actually brought me back, and I coached for a couple of years because he knew, as I do today, that training and coaching and teaching is my passion. It's what I really. It's what I enjoy doing. I do it. It excites me. It's fun just checking the egos at the door and watching the kids and the students. You want them to be better than you, and that's the whole goal as an instructor, in which this whole table does on a daily basis. So when I was done with that, I went into Coach Lubick's. I'll never forget the day. Went into his office one day and told him, "Hey, I'm going to go be a police officer." And he's like, "Wait, what?" We're getting ready for spring ball. And I said, "No, it's." I told him, I said, "Coach, it's just what's in me. It's driving me, and I need to do it." So Arvada was actually the only town I really knew in Colorado, other than Fort Collins. We had a few players on that team that were from the Arvada area. And so when I would, I couldn't afford to go home for Christmas or breaks or anything. And so I would go stay with the guys, and most of them were in the Arvada area. And so it was the only agency I ever applied to. Got on, had a great career, had an opportunity to instruct in several different areas. Had a chance to work alongside AJ and Mike, and they were mentors to me, leaders to me. I was on AJ's team for many years. And, he's the one that invited me to start teaching. It was right when he was putting everything together and putting this class together that, God, I can't even think now, after over 10 years, how many people have gone through it and officers have gone through it. And we're still doing it today. We've already sold out our first 6 classes of 2024 because you can't find better training, right? And so having that honor to be a part of that cadre all those many years ago, and we're still doing it today, is a testament to AJ and John. John, I can't tell you what this guy's meant to us and to our family here. So teaching and instructing is what drives me every day, right? Now I have the opportunity. I took the position as assistant chief with the Lakeside Police Department. I've been there just over a year now. And it's been awesome because it's a department that Chief Gordonaire's done a great job there, but they didn't have a whole lot of, there just wasn't a lot of training. There was just, it's a small department that didn't have the resources and the manpower to be able to really implement a training program. And so that was part of the reason why I went there. It was an opportunity to really put my stamp on the training and build that department. We've been hiring a ton since I've been there. Our officers right now average 72 hours of training a year, and that's just our in-service training with the Lakeside Police Department. That doesn't include any of we mandate the single officer response training and any other training they want to do that they would like to go to, just with our PD. It's 72 hours a year, which, obviously blows away the 24 mandated post hours a year. So I'm very proud of that, and and so it's been an honor and a privilege, and it all stems to the beginning of Centurio and the partnership and the family, and I couldn't ask for anything more to be with these guys on a not a monthly basis anymore, but we get together quite a bit still.
Yeah. And you pulled a major coup d'etat and got Pat Meester over there with you, who's one of the best trainers we know in certain areas. And
he's a commander over there.
Yeah, it's a great deal there.
that leadership that he gives. Because I'm, in my role, as you know, I'm not on the radio listening all the time. I'm in meetings, and I don't get a chance to do the day-to-day stuff. He's down there in the grind with the officers doing it. I mean, his leadership. He was involved in an incident just a couple weeks ago that, these guys, I don't want to say what they would have done before, but with him there, being on scene, suspect with a gun, walking away with officers with the gun in hand, continuously looking back at our guys as they're trying to tactically, stop this guy,
right?
And ended up getting him into custody. Meester actually was the one, that was huge in that.
Yeah.
So
he's a great guy.
The best.
Right.
Dangerous times to be a cop.
That weekend was that was Christmas weekend. I was telling you guys, that was Christmas weekend. That was a Friday. We got a gun off suspect. The next day they got a gun. There was 3 guns in a 4-day stretch there that they got off suspects.
And you're a small
area.
Yeah, it's the world's getting violent for sure. Much more so. So what are you seeing right now as the trends, and as far as getting people to the job and then keeping them on the job? We talk a lot about in this podcast of the difference between the calling that both of you talked about, or the desire to do the job, versus the intrigue for the badge. And we talk a lot about mental health and mentoring and coaching, and how do we keep people focused. And there's a lot of young cops that listen to this that are always interested, or they reach out for more ideas on how to keep themselves focused with all the BS going on in the world. And maybe some insight from you guys for our listeners, the things to think about, and keep yourself focused again for the reason of the job and not the allure of the badge, if you will.
Well, certainly with political and social pressure, I think the allure has maybe been diminished quite a bit. And maybe there was a lot of people that were driven by the allure, and then found, hey, this is a job I can really do. And we had a lot of people looking for this type of work. It's hard to get guys in the door. And, the last, probably 3 years ago, I didn't even think about retirement until,
Until I left.
The protests, COVID. COVID was a huge strain. We're also seeing, a change in operations due to COVID, less contact with folks, less proactive policing, and then the stream of laws that came out really, I call it a tax on law enforcement. And what you tax, you get less of.
Yeah.
And when it saps just the pure joy of putting bad guys in jail, working with victims, having a solution, and then seeing the fruits of your labor actually amount to something substantial. It is causing a lot of folks, I think, to think twice about whether they want to stay in this job, because we don't make widgets, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to see a production line and, oh man, I did a really good job putting that stuff together. Your job is to create a sense of safety and protection for the people that live in the jurisdiction that you work. And I whether you live in that jurisdiction or not, that there's a cop on the streets watching your house while you're gone, and you just want to feel that sense of safety and security. And we can spend a lot of time looking at all the negative stuff that's on the news or in social media or whatever, and it can be a huge weight on your shoulder. Had a long conversation. Well, it's usually a short conversation, but a reminder to my folks. And I'm like, listen, if you find yourself outside this agency, tearing down this agency or the job, just know that you're tearing down the person to your right and left. They're out doing this job. And at the end of the day, your agency is the people in this room, the people doing patrol, the people in investigations, doing the work day in and day out. And it's not the bosses. The bosses are help putting you in play. The bosses have a lot less control than you actually think they would have, right? As a DC, you're like, I have a lot of influence, but it stops at the people who you're influencing.
Right.
And they have to have buy-in. And buy-in comes with hope for the future, hope for the next generation. How do we get those people trained with the right mindset to go do this job day in and day out for 25 plus years, 30 years, and certainly when I stepped on campus at Arvada PD, I was a 28-year-old man. I had 2 kids, had a wife, had a previous job, took a pay cut, but I had hope for the future, and this was a career path that I had chosen, back in college. As far as a lure for the job, I mean, we've got some guys that are showing up, they're in their 40s, and they're like, hey, I did this whole career. I want to go help the community. Unfortunately, maybe their career skills don't match to what it takes to be a cop. And you guys have seen it, right? The training manual when you and I started was about that big.
Yeah.
It is here now, and there is just so much to do. Mental health is a huge thing. Physical health, just, it's one thing to get one of your cops through a call. Now I got to get them through a career. And you can't have that call be their defining moment on their career. And, it's perception of the world, perception of what you're doing. All those things come into it. And, it takes a high level of maturity to get through this job. Yeah. And how do you now bring those people in, right? What's their expectation? We've sat in a lot of, I'm not in recruiting. I know it's a very difficult job. I've had a chance to talk to some people that are involved in that pretty heavily, and you almost got to hang a carrot of, well, this is if you're here for 2 years, you can be a detective, you can be on the SWAT team, you can do all those things. When you and I got on the SWAT team, you had to be on the agency for 5 years.
It was a long time.
Be the best cop on your shift. You were competing hard, and now it's like, hey. You got good marksmanship. You want to be on the SWAT team? And they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Do I have to be on call?
Do I have to be on call? Yeah. And it's that work-life balance and all those things that are important to today's folks. And I'm nobody to preach about work-life balance, man. My wife carries the load, so I can go do what I want to do. This goes deep into society. They're having the same problem finding people for the military. It's hard work. Yeah. But you get to do it with some great people. Mm-hmm. And if you're all rowing the same direction, the job is
nothing better.
There's nothing better.
Right.
And, I talk to my cops, I'm like, this call, it's a troubling call, but you're their cop. Be their cop.
Right.
Be their cop, because they're going to remember you for the rest of their life. They don't go call to call. This is their incident. You're their cop. Be their cop, and support them through this, because you're on the front stoop of their life-changing moment. You can be a positive influence on that, or you can make it harder for them. Right.
That's a really cool perspective. I've not heard it ever phrased that way, but I really understand it and appreciate it. I mean, I think you have opportunity to either make a difference or just be there. And it's not enough to be there. You got to be present in the moment. And if you're doing that, then those victims, those people that need help, you're absolutely right. I mean, I look back at my own life, and the cops that I worked with when I first started my career, or even before that, when my sister was murdered, and the cops that sat me down and made the difference and actually helped guide me to the career. Being that difference maker, I think it's pretty powerful. You can be a mentor, you can be a coach. You guys all coach. I mean, that's what you do for a living. You coach and mentor a lot of young cops and career cops. But I think to do that with the public, it's a great perspective. I absolutely love it.
Well, AJ talks about it all the time. You have a chance to touch somebody on the shoulder and change their life.
Yeah.
And, we're the front line of the government.
Yeah.
We're in uniform. We're the front line of the government. We hold the line. on disorder and crime. But the soft skills are so important to just be real with people, right? And empathize with them. If you can't sympathize with them, empathize with them and help carry them through this issue that you're dealing with. I don't care if it's you're mad at your neighbor or something horrible happens to your family, right?
Yeah.
And it all compounds to, there's multiple angles. It's everything you said, but it all leads to one thing. So obviously the political pressure, but there's a lot more family pressure, I think, now from families not wanting. Used to be, you'd be proud, and now it's, we can make as much money doing this and this without you getting shot at or getting involved in anything. So there's a lot more family pressure, I think. I also think, and this is a unique perspective, but I think it needs to be discussed, and that's a lot more agencies now are poaching. It used to be, you didn't go after cops of other agencies.
Right.
I mean, I see it now as a smaller PD trying to build and bring people in.
And they're cherry picking your
that
guys.
people come in and, we get them through the training, we get them, dialed in, squared away, and other agencies now are coming in and so you're constantly competing for that against other agencies. And in the long run, we're all short now. Mm-hmm. And so now that we're all short, we're fortunate the way we've kind of built our schedule and the training. I mean, we spend a lot of time, I've already mentioned the 72 hours, but a lot of agencies now don't offer as much training as they used to, and that's a fun aspect. People want to go to training, right? And a lot more trainings are getting canceled or denied. I mean, we see it in our class, right? I want to send an officer to a class and it's full, and a couple days later there's 10 spots in it because they just won't allow the officers to, the agencies don't have the manpower, the resources to allow people to go train. So that is frustrating law enforcement officers, right? And what does that lead to? We're all short. It leads to a lot of overtime, which, a lot more hours being worked. They can't do, and I think that you that compounds to officers getting off the job, and going and doing something else where there's not that constant. We're just short. I mean, you're talking about going from call to call to call. You're talking about being shorthanded. They're concerned for the safety, and so it all leads. You know what I mean? There's multiple angles to it, and it all leads to the same thing.
It's that grind.
It's hard.
There's no pressure release off the grind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's hard. It's hard it's hard to find people and keep them. It's just a constant battle.
Wish I could go back 100-something years and take the firefighter model and apply it to police, where they're on and they get a break, right? You get to decompress.
Yeah.
You get to normalize. You get to, have that other side of your life, and it's not just the job.
Well, we had a close. I mean, I think of Arvada back in the day, right? I mean, you weren't best friends with everybody, but you had 20 or 30 people that you considered a friend, right? A real friend, off duty, a friend. Well, now that with the poaching and with people, guys are jumping from and I say guys, officers are jumping from agency to agency to agency. I mean, they're at multiple agencies. I get some of these resumes, and you're at 5, 6, 7 different PDs in a 10-year span. You don't develop that camaraderie, right? You don't have those brothers and sisters that you consider family, and so again, with all the other aspects to it, it's just not. It's not enjoyable for them to be on the job.
Right. Times have definitely, and it's just not our, law enforcement profession. It's you see that across the board of people moving around, and expectancy in a job is less than 5 years, and people are changing and moving, which, in my personal opinion, is a detriment to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. It takes time to be at the agency. It takes time to be embedded in the community, to understand the quirks and the type of services that need to be, and the style of service that needs to be delivered. And when you're moving around so much, it's not only hard on the officers, the agencies, but the community itself.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. It's hard to kind of lead those folks too. If especially if they've been at a couple of different places or even one. We're seeing people that they sit in that across the table from that chief, and they're like, I really want to work at this agency, and please give me the job. They get the job. They walk on campus, and they're like, I don't like the color of the drapes. And before you know it, they're looking at policies, and they want to make changes, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you just got here. Would you please just slow your roll? Learn somebody's name before you start changing policy.
Right? It's like we talk about, people leave California because they don't like the politics there, and they say, hey, Colorado's a great place, let's go there, but then they institute the same politics that they left that made California terrible. And we see that in policing a lot.
Yeah.
Folks are leaving the agency because of X, Y, Z. They're coming to another agency, but yet they want to be like the agency they just left. And so it's quite humorous when you're sitting on the other side going, really? Well, I remember interviewing you saying, hey, can't wait, felony filings, I'll do 100 of them, right?
Yeah. Then they're looking around like, this bullshit. And like I said, but are we being transparent with this is what the job is for the people who are just coming in because they're enamored with the uniform, the status in the community, all those other things, once they get on are the expectations, what they're willing to work with, and are we clearly defining those things? Because we get squishy on those as well, right? The things we do just to bring somebody in the door. And now we're going to mold this clay, and the clay is a little harder to mold. You're not just taking little shavings off. It is like build a cop, right? And, some of those people have gotten the program and are doing a great job. But at the end of the day, I think for anybody trying to get into this job, unless you have family members or something like that, it's a bit of a cold bath when you're immersed in it now.
Yeah.
I try to empathize with the brand new cops because we all remember that first day out of FTO, right? Yeah. You're in the car, you're making the decisions. You don't have your buddy swimming next to you, right, keeping you from drowning, and it is a scary proposition. When do you break out of that and just start working your own operation? To your point, Karl, some of these guys are like, they're a forever 1-year cop. Each agency they go to, they just strung a whole bunch of single days at work together, and they never quite got grounded into the community of that police department. And that police department is a community that has its own norms and values, a way of working. There should be leadership guiding that in the right direction. And making sure that it's serving the people that we're here to serve. And like I said, if everybody's rowing in the same direction, it is a great place to be. And I don't know what you do with the disillusionment, the people who are checking whether they still want to do this or not. Do they leave, a firebomb behind them, or do they just step off quietly and go find something else?
Yeah. Is it true that your single biggest management issue was managing Karl?
Oh, probably, yeah. Between Karl and Mike, both.
I remember this guy in the academy. First of all, I'm like,
too.
who's this old dude? And he was like, 30? But your body had already been through heck. And he's walking up
Bald
to the range.
This is not what
Bald as a cue ball.
I know. His glasses don't fit right because his nose doesn't fit right. And I'm like, look at this guy. But to his credit, he'd been a coach. He was now there to be coached. And he was like, yes, sir. Did everything we asked him to do. And you know what? I'd like to say that I got him a major part in his development. And making sure that he can at least shoot straight. Because, I helped him out.
Yep.
It was, I'll tell you, you sit back, though, and you look at, especially after you leave, and you kind of look back at your career and you look at, where did you maybe have some influence and what people, and these two guys here, I feel like I had a ton of influence on their career, and my attitude was always to just try to give them the foundation. One, maybe smack them behind the head every now and then, right? Which you can't do now. People don't understand that. But give them the foundation and then let them do their thing. And when you do that, you then see guys develop into guys like this here, right? You got an assistant chief, we got a commander, and they're high speed, doing things at a level that, quite frankly, I could probably never get to. And I relied on them in multitude of areas to get stuff done. Those are the good things when you sit back and you think, all the BS and the bullshit and the whatever, those are the things that you choose to remember and think, those are all good. And it makes me very proud to know at least I had a piece in both of their careers, although I probably wanted to kill them more than you want to know. And I'd probably fire Karl at least once a day when we're teaching a class, right? Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be able to say you had a part in that, right?
But you were
freaking knuckleheads.
You were a leader, man. I didn't know we could curse on here, by the way. I would have.
You can curse.
It's okay. I'd have told Mike to shut the F up like 30 minutes ago, but no. You were a great leader, man. And I'll tell you, it was one of those deals. All those years together, it was, we're having fun getting dressed out. We're having fun, Never forget Gomez. McCloskey, Gomez. Every day is his first day.
Right? God bless him.
But no, yeah, he was great. He's great. But then when it was time to dial in, man, it was time to dial in. And so before we walk out of that room every day, it was, let's make sure we're squared away, and don't.
There was a level of maturity on that team though that you could do that. You could joke and laugh, and nobody took anything serious. But then when it was time to be serious, it was time to be serious. And there might be some tough moments, but nobody held on to them. There were no grudges. It is what it was, and never talked about them again. Right? Just moved on down the road.
Those are the groups of officers that you work with. This is exactly what we're talking about, though. Mm-hmm. If you don't stay at a place long enough, you don't experience that, because those years is why it was a huge part of why you kept doing what you're doing. Back then it wasn't the money, right? It wasn't any. It was the fact that these are my brothers, these are my sisters, and we can enjoy, but we know that any minute it could be our given day, right?
And it's still not the money. I mean, law enforcement in Colorado is making good money, but there's better money to be had for what they do. So you still have to admire someone that's in the game wanting to still do it, because they can leave and go to the private sector and do things and triple their salary. And you have to admire the individuals that are doing it for the cause, for the nobility of the job, right?
I took your operational philosophy and I stole it. And
I'm sure I gave it to you.
Man, I ran like a thief with that operational philosophy. And, frankly, I didn't know how to build a department. I had the vision for what I wanted. I didn't know how to build the department that I had. So I brought you three in to be that for our department, to train and to help.
And you regret
mentor.
Every minute of it.
I mean, we talk about building blocks.
Building blocks.
I didn't even have a
I
block.
remember those first oral boards.
I had dirt.
Remember those first oral boards? You're sitting there, and I'm like, what?
It was awful. But, slowly you start building, and then you get, but then people get real training, and they see the professionalism coming in, and then that established credibility, not just internally, but with all of our stakeholders around the metro area and other agencies looking and saying, well, what are they doing here?
Well, it was so important to us, and we had those offline conversations with your guys. It was so important to build up that credibility with the sworn law enforcement officers in the county to know that this guy's solid.
Yes.
He has been trained. He has the right mindset. They have the skills. They have the willingness. And they are not only going to be a resource, but they're going to be on your right side, your left side. And day-to-day interactions build that. And starts with hiring good people,
Yeah.
providing them the training, the ability to live a life and have pay and benefits that support
Yeah.
their family, and then that calling in those schools. I mean, you can't think of anything more precious to protect in those schools, and then just their acceptance of that role and understanding how fleeting that credibility can be
Yeah.
is was a huge push just for the maturity for those cats.
Oh, it changed everything. And we started doing single officer response training and raid, and all of a sudden, my people were thinking, "Hey, I got skills.
Yeah.
I can do this." And then you were transitioning between agencies, and you came over and worked for us full time for a short time, and that had huge ramifications for our team. Looking at a professional like Karl and saying, "Oh, we just stepped up." It was like we were a B team playing an A game. Now we're an A team playing an A game, and it's amazing what one person can do to an organization, either positively or negatively. One person can destroy an organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One person can lift it up, and all of a sudden everybody's running in the same direction.
Yeah.
And
I'll
that's such an opportunity.
I'll tell you what you did, John, is here's where I saw the tables turn from when we first started to when you left, right? Is this is what you saw, and you saw that your officers could now and would lead the way, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before, they'd be on scene with another agency, and the other agency would look at it and see security and think, okay, security, you stay back. Whereas now, there's not an agency in that metro area because of what you did that doesn't know that R1 officers are as well trained, if not better trained, than a lot of agencies, right? And so, hey, you jump into this formation with us. We're going to work, and that is because of what you did.
Well,
And,
it's kind.
and on top of that, I'll say this too, because it stems to AJ, right? And for anyone listening, if they have not been to your class, right, that Mike and I have the honor of teaching, and John having you there at times is huge talking to the group. But here's what you see. You see instructors like Mike. They will, and I know I bust his chops, and we
Oh no,
laugh
is this
at
going to be a nice comment? This is awesome.
But this
Write
is
this
a guy.
down.
This is a guy that
It's
will
on
teach
record.
for, 4 or 5 hours without hesitation, without stopping, constantly coaching, constantly teaching, constantly talking. I mean, we have to look at each other at times and go, we got a break to go to lunch.
Yeah.
After all of these years and all of those classes and all those officers that have come through it, to this day, the training they get, I mean, it is, and the whole thing stems from you as a leader, because, and you've heard me say this, the best leaders are the best teachers. And at the end of the day, your whole goal is to make your students better than you. And you were like that on our team from day one. How Mike is teaching at the class, how I strive to be, right? We train hard, we teach hard, because the whole goal is to make those students better than we are, right? That's it. That's it. We had a school resource officer that's in my son's school, and you better believe that I want him to be way better than I ever was, right? And that's a leader, right? And that starts with you, what you did, what you've done, what you've created, and us as instructors. I mean, leaders in our own, in our organization, but as instructors, I know Mike wants those students to be better than he ever was.
Well, you're teaching life and death strategies. You're teaching tactics that keep people alive and have repercussions to the officers. How many times have you had somebody come to you after a training over the years and say, what you taught me saved my life?
Yeah.
I know it's been dozens and dozens of times. but you're teaching a skill set that is incredibly rare. It's modern day gunfighting in a way that keeps everybody under law, policy, and ethics, right, and keeps us all safe.
Yep.
But that's truly at its core, it's modern day gunfighting skills.
Well, I could tell you, a
And
lot of it goes
decision-making.
to the classes that we teach. The individuals that come to our classes are ready to learn.
Yeah.
They're probably a little bit surprised when they step in and AJ gives the lecture and there's so much passion
Yeah.
and drive. Or Karl's talking to them about their role in this job and this calling. But the passion and drive, they soak that up. And you'll see some of them, they got their hands across, they're like, who the hell is this dude, right? And he tells us, gives us apologies, and this is what you're going to expect, right? But that's because of what Karl said. These guys got to be on their game.
Yeah.
They got to be ready to go, and they got to leave that classroom or that 2 days of training with confidence, right? And that was something that was lacking in the early days of the active shooter world, right?
No question.
It was
It's lacking still today based
Yeah.
off what program they're doing. But yeah.
Yeah, and they may have been on a program, and now they got another way to look at the world, another way to look at where they fit in this tactical engagement, this possible gunfight, right? To go save lives, and then they walk away going, okay, I'm not a pawn in this game.
Right.
I'm not fodder. It is not a trade. My life for theirs. It is. I am going to go stop the threat. I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to have to deal with this situation, but I'm going to be able to go home to my family.
Yeah.
And I can go home to my wife and go, you know what? I have a chance of winning this engagement. I have a high probability of winning this engagement because my brain is engaged, my skills are honed, and should it happen tomorrow, you're going to see me again, babe.
Tomorrow. How about I will never forget us teaching a class, going home, and all of a sudden the phone starts ringing, and it's Aurora.
Yeah.
What was that? 2014? When was
2012.
Aurora? 2012.
That's all.
And if you remember, it was a guy, Darren Walter. Do you guys remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Darren Walter called and the next day and said, because he had just gone through the class, because we were making all, he was with Arvada and came through with Arvada, right, for an in-service.
Yeah.
And was just, I mean, this is a guy that, great guy, right, had been on the job for a long time. Not someone that thought he knew everything by far, but had been through a lot in his career.
Yeah, he did 20 years Albuquerque.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
was
legit.
busy,
Yeah.
right? And maybe would go to a training once in a while, thinking, all right, this is just a day of getting paid, right? And thanked you, and was like, this training was so real.
Yeah.
So important, so critical, and relating it to what had just happened the night before, the day we taught that class.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
Oh, I remember it. Trust me.
Well, John would come in when he does a presentation, talks about the timeline that we're living on, and it's always fluctuating, but the timeline. And we said, hey, we're due, right? And that night,
Yeah. Yeah.
at
Guys were
2.3,
calling me saying,
2.5
we
years.
want to deploy. And I'm
That's
like,
right.
I'm not on the streets. I can't tell you to deploy. What's the sergeant saying? Because it was my team. I was running the graveyard team that year.
That's right.
And we're, for those
Right,
listeners
that's
that
exactly
don't,
right. I remember John saying that too, given the timeline.
and for those listeners that don't know, we're talking about the Aurora Theater shooting, and that conversation that happened just hours before.
Just out training.
training.
out
And the
before
class we're
that.
talking about is a single officer response to an active shooter.
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of just gives me goosebumps thinking about it, remembering back. Yeah,
Any given day, right?
any given
Any
day.
given day.
Yeah, and we've all been there.
And really, the thing that I think we've refined is giving these guys the opportunity to be excellent at what they do. They have to be excellent on their given day, their moment. They can't be half-assed. They've got to be excellent. and they're given the tools, the skill, the mindset, the ability to process the environment to be able to do that and fight smarter instead of all the bravado and the BS that we still hear, right, that runs across the country.
Well, that's easy, right?
That's easy.
That's easy to say.
Yeah,
just
run
get
with
through
your
that
ass
door.
on fire, jump in the room, see who wins a gunfight. That's an easy way to do it.
And training's done in 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I want to be thinking individuals because they're not going to run into. I mean, it's one thing to say run through that door. What if the door's locked? Right?
Right.
How are you going to manage that? That's an environmental
Yeah.
issue, right? We got to
Or
cover that.
what if he's shooting through the door?
Yeah.
Right? Goes back to the whole Uvalde conversation, you know. The failure there was years before Uvalde happened. The failure at Uvalde, and we've talked about this, and I don't mean to even change the context here. Now we are going to get deep and heavy.
Yeah.
That's not what we wanted to do on this one, but was a failure in leadership, of foresight, of thinking ahead, knowing that someday someone's going to be shooting through the door, and if the only option we give our cops is to run into that doorway while somebody's shooting through it, we're going to have a failure point. Right? And so we talk about hammer anvil. Where can we address this situation? Is it from the outside? Is there another portal that we can address? Do we make our own? What does that look like? But that's the failure, right? Because every dilemma has been identified as a nail, and so our only solution is a hammer and hit it with it. And you knew at some point there was going to be a failure because we got leaders that are, and we have instructors that even want to argue the point, right? Because they're not worldly enough to say, oh, wait a minute, this dilemma is going to happen and we're going to have to do some things differently.
Well, it's about having conversation, right? And, you know, of course, we have a number of body cams that show bad tactics or bad deployment or whatever. And, you know, I can't have an argument with somebody who is concerned about the optics of something. Well, the optics we need to be moving with a purpose. And we need to be
Right.
changing that environment. And we need to get aggressive on things that we can accomplish. And once again, you know, we can't tell our students, our cops, you're a trade.
Well, it becomes easy when that's the mission, right?
Yeah.
We talk about PI, and for those that are listening and listened 2 episodes ago, I gave you the 7 pillars. Well, I added an 8th. We got an 8th pillar now, and that's
nice.
decision making.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
We should talk about
so
those pillars as we build them.
So it's yeah, right. It's really the 8 pillars now, because I was sitting and I was going to Oregon, and I'm just kind of going over things in my mind, and I'm like, you know what, we need to expand on this decision making because it's in tactics and all that. But our philosophy of PI, priorities, intel, and environment, intel becomes that driving point. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's easy to say, oh, there's shots been fired in this building. By God, we got to keep moving and get it cleared. Well, if the intel, there's no more shooting going on, and the intel is there's people dying and bleeding out, that then becomes the priority, and we need to be smart enough and adaptable and nimble enough to change what we're doing to address that, right? I mean, it just becomes simple decision making. That
Well, and it's work with what you know, what you have.
Right.
Not we think, right? Or we hope,
Yeah.
or maybe.
No.
Those are all squishy. And we can be on that path and look like we're doing something, but you're not accomplishing anything for the people that need you.
Exactly.
No.
And training is paramount, right? That's the foundation, right? Because we can put everything on paper, and this is how we're going to do something, and this is how we're going to respond. But if we don't train it over and over and over, okay, so let's talk, related to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You can't escape the mount by doing it 3 times a year.
Right.
Because when it's on, the stress and the S&S kicking in and all that activation is when we lose that critical thinking, right? And so training is so paramount that people just do not. They'll yes, we're going to do this, but we have to train it over and over and over again.
And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that Karl is a black belt in a couple different disciplines, and I personally have studied under you since 2007, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride.
I think I've
But
earned
yeah,
my
right.
yellow belt 3 times. 'Cause I stop and then I start and then I stop and I start. And I'm like, my skeleton doesn't hold up, man.
I had one of my guys decide he wants to join Karl's class. After the first day, he came back to me. He's like, "Oh, I don't know what I got into here." so then,
not for the
it's
faint-hearted.
like 2 months later, he comes to me. He goes, "So AJ was in our class today," and I said, "How'd that go?" He goes, "Oh, I don't know if I can deal with that anymore." It's like he's like, "I thought Karl was intense."
But it all relates though, right?
Yeah,
Totally.
And you there's again, the multiple angles and facets of everything we do. We instructors and agency leads that they don't talk enough about what's going to happen to you under stress, and that's trained on. You know what I mean? That's trained. I mean, we got to give them the tools.
Right.
Karl, you in the single officer response course, you get up in front of the class every single time, and you talk about incredibly personal story of friends and brothers in New York in 9/11. Can you just talk a little bit about that? What you share with cops? Because I think that's so valuable.
Well, it's an honor. It's always an honor to talk about the Foley family.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my best friends growing up, my family growing up, I didn't have a dad. I didn't. My mom raised me, and she did a great job. She's strong. But my father figure was Mr. Foley, who lived next door, and his wife, and they had 3 kids, Tommy, Joanne, and Danny Foley. Danny Foley was my age. We were in the same class together, and Tommy was 2 years older than us. All 3, including Mr. Foley, were firemen. Like I said, that's how we grew up. And I will never forget, I was coaching football at South Dakota State on September 11th, 2001, when I walked into the office and I saw our secretary crying. Asked her what was going on. She couldn't relay what was happening. And obviously I could see she was looking at a screen underneath her working space. And I walked around and I saw the plane hitting the first tower. I'm calling home. You couldn't get home for days on the phone, right? Long story short, Tommy Foley, who loved football, wasn't the best athlete in the world, but was tough. Decided after high school that he was going to try to become a college football player. Kind of walked down to a junior college, local junior college, broke his leg so badly they had to put a metal plate into his leg, and then became a fireman. Had a great career, was Rescue 1 Big Blue, which is kind of the SWAT team of the New York Fire Department, right? On September 11th, when the first tower got hit, Tommy was driving home from work, and he did what everybody in this room would have done, and everybody listening and watching your podcast would do, and understand the calling of what we are, right? Turned around and went to work. He was in Tower 1 when it collapsed. And obviously we all know, most of us know the stories of these firemen not leaving the area, digging for their brothers and sisters. The police, it was, the stories coming out of there where police were being ordered to make these firemen leave the area because it just wasn't safe, and they were there for hours and hours. Danny Foley and Mr. Foley had snuck back on because they wanted to find Tommy, right? They had an idea where he was. He was in this elevator shaft area where fuel had obviously pooled, and when it ignited, eliminated everything in that space, right? So as they're digging, they find a metal plate attached to a piece of bone, and did the DNA, and it was Tommy, right? And so they buried Tommy. Mr. Foley passed away, and again, you talk about just the correlation in what we do and how it never goes away, right? We live it every day. We were teaching a class, when I got the call. Mr. Foley had passed away. I was teaching single officer response, and I got that phone call, and I was stuck for a while, right? You had to pull yourself out and go back to work like we do in all these situations, but it was tough. And then in August of 2020, right? We found out that Danny, like many of the firemen, were starting to get cancer from all of what, working in that area, in that environment for so many hours. And he knew it was terminal, and he knew it was going to be quick. As a matter of fact, Anderson Cooper did a story because Danny went down to the White House because they were not giving these guys in line of duty deaths, and we know how important that is.
It's a benefit,
Danny passed away in February of 2020, and it was obviously it was, but I was holding it together, and I'll tell this, I was holding it together, and I remember I was in the procession, and I was with the family because they were my family, right? I was in and if you recall, in that time frame, we were jaded. We were jaded. We had the civil unrest, the protests. Everyone hated us in uniform, and so what did we do? We started to hate them back because we're human beings, right? We would put our feelings aside when we needed to, when we would protect and serve, like we took the oath to do. But we were angry, right? It was a bad time, right? And so I'm holding it together, and people are coming out. I mean, I remember seeing the engines on this is Yonkers to New Rochelle, on the overpasses, the engines and the lines of officers and people coming out. And then I recall, and my son at the time was, in 2020, he was 5. And I recall seeing a bar that I was very familiar with because growing up,
That's where you grew up.
And a father walked out, and so he had his son on his shoulders. And as they walked out, I'm watching this little boy because he reminded me of Caden, looked like him. And he then raises this boy raises his hand and salutes.
Yeah.
And man, did I lose it then. Because there you realize why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Right? And you put that anger aside, and you go back to work, and but you realize that not everybody can do what we do. It is a calling, and it's special, and it's the most noble profession there is, as AJ will always tell you.
Yeah.
And so we buried Danny next to Tommy, So I appreciate you asking, because I always start. And I will end with this because I know I'm becoming Mike. I always start our classes and ask, why are you on the job? Why are you on the job? What drives you? And they all have the right answers. A lot of the academy answers, right? Oh, to protect and but they mean it. It's just been drilled, but they mean it, right? And very few will answer the job as a calling. And I explain about thinking about those firemen with 65 pounds of crap on their back, and they're climbing up. If you don't know what the towers how tall they were, you wouldn't see the top on a cloudy day. And thinking of these guys climbing up those stairs, because obviously the elevators are down, in that black thick smoke as everybody else is running down, screaming and crying, and our guys are going up because it's a calling, right? They're doing that, and I think of that, and it means the world to me, right? These guys, you guys mean the world to me. Everyone listening on the job means the world. We're all in this thing together, but it's special, right? So I appreciate that.
And it doesn't get any more pure than that, right?
No.
It doesn't get any more pure than that.
I asked not to get choked up every time he tells that story.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's emotional stuff. This work sometimes gets pretty emotional. I mean, it's life, right? It's just...
It's just the base.
Yeah.
And they predetermined what they were going to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't, make it up. And they had all the hope in the world that they would get up there and save people. They had no inclination that building would fall.
Mm-hmm.
But they were doing their job, and they were doing it for the the firefighters with them.
Yeah.
And they were doing it for the people who needed them. And, you know, we need to get that type of human being into this job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no question. I was just thinking back to, we had an opportunity to interview and do a podcast with Brian Murphy. You got to go back and listen to that podcast. It's really good.
Mike said that, yeah.
Yeah. So
I got to learn what a podcast was
right,
first.
exactly. Now that you know,
Not on my
Well, you're not in a pod, but
you got to listen to Brian Murphy. He talks about after being shot 15 times, he's in the hospital, and he starts thinking about, what's my echo? What's your echo in life? What drives you? What's that passion within you? And everybody ought to ask, what's my echo?
Yeah.
And I think you just talked about it. It's for people that live this life, it is a calling. There's no other way to describe it. That is your echo. It's a powerful one because it's constantly in you, and it drives you, motivates you, and at the end of the day, it'll beat you down if you're not careful. But there's power in it.
Here's what's I think is important, right? And I won't be able to say it. First of all, I want to say this too. Ever since I heard John Michael Keyes say that, that statement about calm,
Peace.
and you could peace, and you could say it word for word. I can't, but every time I hear you say it or have him say it, I like to think that those guys, Tommy, had that right in their heart in that chaos, because I can't imagine any more chaos than that, right? That scene. But I tell my son this, and I preach it to him, that there's a reason to me. Everyone had, over the years and years. I mean, Sir Robert Peel, right? Late 1800s, where it kind of all started. But to me, there's a reason why we put the badge over our heart. Now, we know it goes back to the Romans and the shield and all that. But I always tell him, ask him, what's your biggest muscle? My heart, Dad, your heart. And we know it's not, but in reality, but it is. What's your biggest muscle? Your heart. And we as human beings, we're soft. We're made of flesh and bone. It's not hard, right? And it breaks easy, it cuts easy. But what you're saying is exactly what it's so hard to define and put in a bottle. But that is, if you can lead with your heart, and when the time comes to it, fight with that heart and that passion, you could do anything, man. You could do anything. As weak as we are, we lift weights, we try to, but again, we're fragile. Human beings, we're fragile, man, right? But when you lead with that heart and you allow that to drive you, you can do incredible things. And that's what it takes to be on the job, right? And that's what Mike said, getting those kind of people that will lead that way and step up when their time comes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that quote is peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. I know that's exactly what you're speaking to. Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is powerful. Well, gentlemen,
Been a good podcast.
it's been a good. I thought it was going to be. You said it was going to be more lighthearted.
You kind of took it into it. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, it wasn't me this time.
Here, let Mike sign us off. It'll get lighthearted
Right.
real quick.
Right?
No,
Any last words of wisdom you guys want to share with our listeners before we?
I think I want to thank the listeners for listening, right?
Yeah.
There is some important people that have been through some things. Just the display of resilience and resolve to do it better. And like Karl said, lead with your heart. Get away from the bravado. Proud of my uniform, but I'm just a person inside of a uniform, right? I need to fill that uniform, right? And make sure that
everybody is doing a gut check. And it may be a daily gut check. It may be minute to minute, especially if you're dealing with, things that are tearing you down. Get yourself back on the path. And, these are always good conversations to listen to. I love listening to the podcast because there's wisdom in life lived pursuing a righteous cause. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys. Normally, if we were on the range or doing something, I'd be yelling at Karl and he'd be yelling back at me and we'd have a good time. Maybe we'll have another chance to get on and
we'll do
lighten it up a little bit.
We'll do this again.
Just like brothers do, right?
That's right.
Just like brothers do.
Yeah. Yeah, live that life to its fullest, right? We were talking earlier, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it. I don't know if either of you can really go back and talk with authority about who your great-grandfather was. Right? It's hard. And so, your time here is short. Mm-hmm. Your legacy and influence is even shorter. There's going to be a time where, you're not even a name on the wall anymore. And you need to make sure that the time here is spent doing those positive things, right? The bigger cause, and not the grumbling and the complaining and the stuff that just wears you down. There's a time and place for it, I guess, but try and keep that stuff in check and know that, your time here is limited. So make sure you're pouring every ounce of energy you can into the right cause. Yeah.
So last words of wisdom from you?
The only thing I'd ever say is always be a pro, be a professional, right? Be a pro, and always give credit where credit is due. And so I'm going to say, I'll end with this because this comes from you. You created this verbiage. I rearrange it just a little bit, but AJ will always tell you get paid to do 3 things: listen, communicate, and make good decisions. And that's it. Be a pro, all right? So, but thank you for having us. This was an honor. It was fun.
It's a good time. Yeah. So we close every one of our episodes with this quote. And this quote, as many of our listeners know, and if we have any new listeners, I'll explain it to you, goes back to the Roman legions. You can actually trace this all the way back to the Roman legions, 3 different versions of Latin. Of course, we say it in English, and we modify it just a little bit. But to us, and those like us, the centurions, damn few left. Thanks for listening.